is the Seahawkers Podcast, episode 425. I'm Brandon Schultz of the Military Seahawkers, and I am joined by my good buddy, Adam Emmert.
Hey, man. Nice to be with you today, even after a tough loss in Dallas and a tough upcoming game here against the 49ers for sure. But some positives we could talk about from the Dallas game, I'm sure, and some things to talk about with the Niners as well. So it should be an interesting pod.
Yeah, well, even after the game with Dallas, I felt better because there were some changes that I think that we had been asking for. We got almost a complete game of offense, and that would have been enough if the defense, it was almost enough as it was through three quarters. It's just that the defense ended up giving up points late. The offense couldn't respond in the fourth quarter, and we end up taking the L. But I saw enough from the offense to see some improvements that would make me think, okay, maybe we don't have to be doom and gloom over the next 2 weeks. Although I think there's the significant portion of fans that are out there that are a little doom and gloom over the next couple of weeks. And it's understandable because some good teams coming up between the Niners and Eagles the following week. But I still have some room for optimism.
I would agree with you, man. Like if we had seen this team come out and basically perform on offense as it had the last few weeks, where we're going, what in the world, man? I mean, these guys don't even look like they know how to play with all of this talent. Like, how is this possible? I probably would have been a lot more doom and gloom after the Dallas game if it would have been a lot more the same, but it was different. And I will take the change. Basically, probably the biggest change in the philosophy offensively was a commitment to running the ball early and often. I mean, Charbonnet ended up with 19 carries. You did hear Pete talk about the running game and like, hey, we need to get it going better and things like that after that game, kind of lamenting that Charbonnet couldn't bust off any big ones. And, ended up with like 3-point-something yards per carry. But I think that shows just how much the amount of yards that you really gain on the ground, as long as they're positive, doesn't much matter. It's more the attempt to run the football that then sucks up the linebackers, which then means that you can work the short middle of the field and, medium depth middle of the field. And that's something that they did with, I think, a lot more efficiency in this game.
Yeah, all the positive things that happened through the first three quarters, but then it was kind of soured and wiped out, especially by that final fourth down play where after the game, we were trying to decide, okay, whose fault was it? Did somebody not protect? Did Geno not shift the protection properly? Did Abe Lucas miss a block on Parsons? Was that supposed to be a chip by DJ en route to going out? And it turns out, no, it's just designed for Micah Parsons to go unblocked completely at Geno Smith on that play. So as much praise as we have to give, then we also have to recognize that it wasn't all good.
It wasn't all good. It's not perfect, no doubt about it. But yeah, that last fourth down play, really all the fourth down plays didn't go well. They had the run to Charbonnet out of shotgun. I like the call, but it was, according to Pete, a weird alignment by the defensive lineman that then crashed down and got inside of Crosshair, and he wasn't expecting it. And then obviously that last fourth down, was that the final answer that we got? That, oops, yeah, no, we just weren't going to block him on that play? Because I heard Pete say in his presser, well, I'm not real sure. I mean, I don't know if Geno called him to go down like that, speaking of Abe, or if he just, saw a flash and targeted that way or whatever. But the consensus was, we'll just maybe not block the second best defensive player in the whole league, first best player in the whole league. Who knows?
I tend to believe Geno immediately after the game, because then they haven't had time to figure out the answer that then best protects the member of the team that they're trying to protect. And I'm going to take Geno's answer immediately after the game as the one that's the most likely.
All right, there we go. So he just he took Waldron and hit him with both axles when he ran over him with the bus.
Well, and I don't think it's necessarily that. I think there's confidence that goes into being an NFL player. They don't look at it as we're giving the ball to our seventh best player on offense against on a play that's going to the side of Dallas's best defender. They think we as a team are going to out execute and be better than the opposition. And that's just what's going to happen. That's the kind of confidence that we have in our own team. Whereas I think as fans, we think of it much more as this matchup based, and then it seems silly.
With that said, I don't mind that they went to a third string running back in the situation. How many times on fourth down do you see teams use, the fullback as the guy they leak out into the flat or give the ball to in a run, or another unheralded player because it breaks a tendency and, surprises
like throwing
defense.
to Ricardo Lockett on the goal line,
yes,
rather than running the football.
Right. Yeah, exactly that one. I'm really glad you brought that one up. That was the one I was definitely thinking of. Not at all. But that part of it doesn't bother me quite as much as the idea that you're going to leave one of the best defenders in the league unblocked, and you're just going to out execute him in a hurry when the guy's one of the fastest DNs in the entire league, linebacker, whatever the heck he is. I mean, he does a little bit of everything. So that's the part that sticks in my craw a little bit.
It wasn't good. And I think that message was received based on fan responses after the game. And you know what? Maybe that can improve too. I don't know. I still have a hard time saying that one call is a fireable offense. I know that some of you will disagree with that point, but I saw enough improvement that I feel a little bit better. And I don't know if we're necessarily going to get better by firing Shane Waldron and finishing the season with, I don't know what interim coach takes over. Maybe, you know what? I think I did figure out who would take over, because we have would
it be Tater?
I don't think so. Wouldn't it be like Kerry Joseph or somebody?
Sure. Yeah. Okay. If you, who knows? I don't know.
Wasn't he a former quarterback? I feel like that would be the guy to do it.
Possibly. I don't know. I don't know much about the fellow, but
I don't know.
Yeah.
He's assistant quarterbacks coach. That's a heck of a promotion, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, when you're looking at this, that Pete's not going to fire Waldron midseason. And on top of that, we saw growth from Waldron in that game. He actually got it and changed his offensive philosophy just a little bit. And again, it didn't take much, just about 4 or 5 more carries for Charbonnet. And all of a sudden now the offense looks completely different. And they were able to compete against one of the teams that I think everybody agrees is one of the more upper echelon teams in the NFC, along with the Eagles. And then you have the Niners, who are kind of in their own category right now. And watching us come out and compete the way that they did against a Dallas team that's been very tough at home offers me a lot of hope going down the stretch. We're 6-6. We're, half game out of the playoffs here. And I think that, there's a legit shot that they still make the playoffs. And Pete obviously thinks that as well. You heard him during the coaches show talking about when we make the playoffs and going full on, speaking it into existence, which I like. It also gives me some hope. I do think that the season is still very much alive. A lot of people think it's dead.
And I don't fault them for thinking that. I mean, after the Rams loss, we knew that it was going to be a difficult stretch and that they're going to have to likely pick up one of these games. And the way it's been going, it seemed like Dallas might be the most likely. Now it seems like Philly in 2 weeks might be the most likely. But we don't know what ultimately, I mean, they could get it next week. They have to. And even if they don't, then they have to win out. Very likely. I'm not going to take any of it for granted, but the NFC isn't very good outside of the top teams.
I mean, is the AFC all that much better? Really?
But we have to make the playoffs in the NFC.
Well, that's true. That's true. We can't just switch over to the AFC again, right? That's not an option. But it does feel like it's all right there. Now, with that said, it was a no good, bad weekend for the Seahawks as a whole, with Atlanta winning and the Packers winning and Tampa winning.
Everybody in the NFC West winning.
Yeah. So
did you say the Packers?
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Chiefs. Jeez Louise.
Yeah, we knew it wasn't going well when the Chiefs couldn't even get a win over the stinking Packers.
Right. Packers are playing good football right now, though. And Jordan Love is looking like he's starting to figure it out in his first full season as a starter. I remember being made fun of for proposing before the Geno Smith year that I'd love Jordan Love to be the guy that they would trade for to be your starting quarterback. Now, obviously, Green Bay wasn't going to do that. Now that we see the plan, they were ready to move on and they believed in Love. But he's been playing good football. But this team is playing better football.
And then you
Seahawks,
wrote him off 4 weeks ago, and then he's bounced back.
I didn't write him off.
I don't know. You kind of seem like maybe what I said about Love isn't looking so good right now.
Yeah, just like the early returns aren't looking great. But again, let's give him 2-3 years as a starter, and then we can actually go in on things. And I think that is also something, too, that we need to remember when we're talking about this team with the Seahawks is we're all very much a prisoner of the moment. 3-game losing skid, another tough game against a divisional opponent who is the best team in football right now. And a lot of people losing their minds and calling for heads and jobs and things like that right now in the middle of the season. I don't think that gets you anywhere. How many YouTubers did you see that were having a full on fire Pete meltdown, Brandon?
Well, I don't know if I watched enough to be able to tally that complete number. I'd expect that it's high, but I also expect that that same group of people looked at these few weeks under extreme pessimism and said, yeah, we might beat the Rams, but we're probably going to lose the 4 games that are after the Rams game. I bet those same people were saying that prior to calling for Pete to be fired. So I don't know how that has changed a whole lot necessarily.
It hasn't. It's just a reality of the losses that have stacked up here.
It's a reaffirmation of, I thought this was going to happen, and here it is happening. Somebody should be fired because I'm right. Yeah,
and really the argument, which has a little bit of merit, I mean, I can't poo-poo it completely, is the defense is now god-awful suddenly, and that's Pete's side of the ball. And
sure,
what's the point of having a defensive coach if you can't have a decent defense, especially with as much money as they put into the back end of the D and all of that stuff? Okay. I mean, it's certainly an argument, but again, if you're expecting Pete to be gone by the end of the year, like, you're going to be disappointed. It's just not going to happen. And I doubt it even happens after the season, especially if they're at the very least within a game of the playoffs. If they just implode the rest of the way, maybe that's on the table, but I kind of sincerely doubt it, especially after watching the Dallas game. Clearly the Niners are a cut above everybody. And then watching the Eagles get trounced by the Niners the way that they did, they lost worse than we did. I feel like that's another gettable team, especially after playing Dallas as tightly as they did.
Yeah, I feel like the Eagles approached that game a lot different than the Niners did. I think the Niners looked at that kind of as the NFC Championship rematch that it was, and to kind of right the wrong that happened when Purdy got injured and they didn't get to finish that game how they wanted. So I think they went into that with a little bit different mindset than the Eagles did. That said, that game goes a whole lot different if the Eagles come out and score touchdowns on their first couple drives rather than get held to field goals by the defense. And yeah, that's a factor of the 49ers defense being good, but it's also, I just have to wonder, hey, if they're able to punch it in the end zone and get up by 2 touchdowns, it makes that look a whole lot different. And maybe the Niners still bounce back. It just ends up being a little bit closer for a little bit longer.
Yeah, that's all true. It also is true that the Eagles have been eking out wins in the last 3-4 games as well. So it's not like they've been out there being extra dominant either.
No.
So again, it's one of those teams that I think you can get. Now, with all that said, it's going to have to come with an improvement from the defense here this next week coming up against the Niners. And they actually did an okay job for 2 quarters against the Niners. And if they could just replicate that and the offense replicate what they did against Dallas or some version of it, or what they did against the Niners in the third quarter by running the football early and often, this could be a close game, especially with the Niners flying as high as they are. It does feel a little trappy.
A little bit trappy for the Niners. Yeah. You said something about the defense being suddenly bad. And I don't know if it has been necessarily suddenly bad. It's been consistently inconsistent throughout this season. And they've put together stretches to where you say, oh, yeah, here's some pieces here. But there's also been some stretches where you're scratching your head thinking, has anything changed over the last 3 to 4 years? So I feel like we have a pretty good idea that there's not going to be any kind of magic fix that happens and things are just going to suddenly come together for the defense, especially in a game against the 49ers. It's more of a question of can enough come together and the offense score enough points to where you can hang with them and make it close. And I am hopeful for the offense. I mean, the interesting thing is about scoring 30 plus against the Cowboys defense. There's only 2 teams in the NFL this year to score 30 plus against the Cowboys D. It's the Seahawks offense and the 49ers offense that put up 40.
There you go. The NFC West. And, it's a tough division this year with the Rams playing a little above the level that maybe we thought they would coming out of the gate. I guess I'm just surprised that Stafford has been on the field for as much as he has. That seemed unlikely, but losing 2 to them really did hurt. But yes, the offense did perform against a really good Dallas defense. And that was definitely a surprise to me. And again, one of those things that gives me some encouragement going forward here, despite whatever the result may be in Santa Clara this upcoming Sunday.
So going down to Santa Clara, facing the Niners, it got me thinking about, especially on defense, because it hasn't been really what we expected. And sure, you can point to some of the injuries. There's some people pointing to the fact that the offense hasn't been able to sustain drives consistently, and that's left the defense on the field more than it has needed to. Time of possession playing a little bit of a factor. I don't know if I would buy that as the complete issue because they've been bad, not just in the fourth quarter. And they've been not that great at, especially initial drives. So it just got me thinking that with this game coming up against the Niners, what areas of the team, and thinking especially on defense, would we need to change out to be competitive with the type of offensive style that Shanahan plays consistently against this defense? Because I think there is more of an issue toward personnel than coaching and the offense that you can point to.
Interesting. Okay. So you think it's more of a personnel situation on defense rather than coaching. That's interesting to me because to me, it's more on the coaching end of things. There's plenty of talent on that defense. Doesn't feel to me that that's the problem. The problem is you look at it as a whole, it's been crossers over the middle and all of the coverage in the middle of the field, which is where Purdy likes to eat. You heard Greg Olsen talk about it ad nauseum during the Eagles game, and he's not wrong. But they're going to need to take those zone principles and make it so that when a guy crosses your zone, you match up to him man coverage, or you take the risk to jump that route more often than you used to. Because right now, the sitting back and just letting them hit it, that's not working. It's not working at all. And then you're hoping that you can rally to make the tackle. And you're like, okay, well, that's fine and dandy. But when you've got Bobby out there in coverage, it's not like he's going to run a dude down and make the tackle out in space like that. And Quadre's tackling hasn't been quite where we'd like to see it. Jamal, it's a little boom or bust on the tackling end of things. So I feel like your best option is to actually have a man on a man. If you want to show zone at first at the beginning of the play, that's fine. I understand trying to vary things up, and offenses have man beaters too. But that, to me, that's what the best defenses look like when they're doing it right. Is they turn that zone into a man matchup at some point.
And I would say that matching them up man to man is probably a better way to go, just because we've seen Kyle Shanahan just rip apart zone defenses, whether it's the Seahawks, whether we saw it against the Eagles too, and they played a lot of zone. It's interesting though that you put it more toward coaching, and then you ran down the same list of players that I have issues with when they face a team like the 49ers. Like Bobby Wagner, I would not have him in coverage. And because I don't think that there's a way for him to necessarily stick with a guy like Deebo Samuel. He is not as fast as he was when he was younger. So if they run Deebo into his zone, he's not going to be able to necessarily stick with him man to man. And what is he going to do necessarily in zone other than just cover space? So it's kind of the bind that the Seahawks defense is in there. You mentioned Jamal. Other than on the field stuff, he's had some off the field stuff that's been kind of boneheaded lately that has me kind of out on Jamal altogether. And then Quandre, I love the dude, but and he's a good down the field pass eraser, but the missed tackles and the ability to play in the run game has been kind of a liability this year too.
Yeah, it's been a little rough. Now, in terms of Bobby and coverage and that sort of thing and running people down and all that, I can't imagine that there's one linebacker in his prime right now today that's going to keep up with Deebo Samuel over the middle.
No, and that's why, and it's not going to fix the issue for this next game. I'm just thinking of, in an ideal offseason, which of those pieces do you maybe move out and try and find replacements for that could compete a little bit better? So I'm not necessarily thinking of this game coming up against the Niners because nothing's going to fix the personnel that we have in the meantime, other than, playing it a little bit differently, playing a little more man and trying to keep it a little bit closer and maybe force some more turnover worthy plays. But how would we change based on what the Niners have been doing? Because you're going to have to face that team twice a year as long as Shanahan's there.
Oh, without question. And, maybe some of it you said, well, we can't really fix the personnel right now. Okay, that's fine. But you could do a few other things as well in terms of when Deebo's out on the field and McCaffrey are out on the field, you take one dude for each of those guys and you're like, follow him everywhere. Like, I don't care what the rest of the scheme is, just stick with them. And, maybe that would help a little bit. It's hard to know because you watch the Eagles defense against this team and they've got that defensive line that everybody talks about. And Purdy just sat back there and patted the ball all day and really didn't have to deal with much pressure at all. And so when you see that and you see the way the Niners are playing in the trenches on both sides of the football, I felt like that I need to say that they are the best team in football and acknowledge that and why they are the best team in football. Because if we're going to be taken seriously at all as a podcast, I think we need to be able to, give them their credit when credit is due.
Gross. Why would
it's
you
not
do that?
Fun. Credibility, that sort of thing. But
I don't feel the need for that.
No. Okay. Well, that's fine, I suppose. But yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup. And I'm not necessarily looking at the Niners game as the one that I'm like, okay, they get this one or they've got a shot to get this one and everything's going to be fine. This is still the one where I'm like, all right, we suffer through that game and see what it looks like. And at the end of that, then we'll see if they can make it happen. And I mean, it's going to be tough. Like you said, you're going to have to probably win out at that point.
It is going to be a tough game just in terms of this matchup, which is why I was kind of leaning toward the offensive side and that we're going to have to see, despite how good the Niners defense is, a similar offensive performance that we saw against the Cowboys to where you're going to have to match scores with this team, especially playing down in Santa Clara. So tough matchup, but I did some digging, Adam, on looking for some ways to be a little bit optimistic about this game. Never in 49ers history has that franchise beat the Seahawks more than 4 times in a row. They won 4 straight from 2010 to 2012, and they have a 4-game winning streak right now. Even going back, so the other one was a 3-game losing streak that was back, Joe Montana time.
Okay.
The fun thing about that, though, is every time they've come up against that significant losing streak, they've smashed the Niners. Like they've smashed them. They beat them 38-9 back in 1997 over the Steve Young-led team after 3 straight losses, and they won 42-13 back in 2012 after our last stretch of 4 straight losses.
Okay, well, so you're saying that there's a chance, and there absolutely is. You think about offensively, you're right. They're going to have to score more points and be more consistent and try to keep the defense off the field and try to protect them as much as they can. And there are some personnel changes with the offense. One in particular that I think we saw in the Dallas game made a gigantic difference, and that was the return of Abe Lucas. He is such an upgrade over Forsythe, or at this stage in his career, Jason Peters. And it really did kind of bring that whole offensive line together. Cross still had some struggles against Micah Parsons. I mean, he's a human being. I'm not surprised. Those things happen. But I think the addition of Abe in this game, and he got out of the last game pretty well, it sounds like, and is feeling good. So I'm hoping we see more of him and a little less of the rotation. And then also, does it sound like K9's going to be back? I mean, Pete seemed a little optimistic the last time I heard him talk about it, just with the extra few days with a little bit longer week here.
Maybe, but on Wednesday, neither Charbonnet or Walker participated in practice. They brought back, who is the guy that from the preseason?
How am I spacing on his name? He's a slasher, and he was good. Sir Roderick.
Yes, Sir Roderick Thompson.
Yeah.
They brought him back.
Cool. That sounds good. I think a lot of people, if this trend continues, are going to get their wish to see a little more Kenny Mack. A lot of people up in the comments about that and wanting to see more of him. So, I mean, that'll be, I guess, interesting. I mean, be one of his first games playing and have to go against that Niners defense. But yeah, we're going to need at least one of K9 or Charbonnet to be good enough to go in this game to really have a fighting chance.
You don't think 20 carries with DJ Dallas gets it done?
No. Quite simply.
All right. Well, he is our third string running back. Another big game
from DK would sure help. I mean, he was a monster against the Cowboys, man.
3 touchdowns, and one of those coming after they scored 2 straight touchdowns on consecutive plays that came off the board, and that got him up to 3. He tied with Bland now with his 6 pick sixes.
There you go. And he's going to surpass Bland here this week against the 49ers. I do have just a sneaking weird gut intuition that they're going to have a real chance to win this game at the end. And they've had a couple go against him here in this losing streak. They had a chance against the Rams. Obviously, they did not have a chance against the Niners. And obviously, they had a nice chance against Dallas there. So it's not like they're getting blowed off the field by the rest of the league, short of, the number 1 or number 2 team in the league.
So are we weird for thinking that we have a chance against this team? Like I just came up with historical data points that make me hopeful, even though there's, nothing to do with these 2 teams that lead into either of those points. But that's how deep I had to go this week to find some speck of optimism for this weekend's game.
Yeah, I mean, it was a good stat that way, and that can give you a little bit of hope. I think just watching the offense turn a page a little bit this last week against a very good defense, that should give you quite a bit of hope. Knowing that the defense was able to put the clamps down on the 49ers for about a quarter there during the first matchup, that should give you a little bit of hope. The idea that it's a divisional matchup and weird things happen, that should give you a little bit of hope. The idea that the Niners are for sure reading all of their press clippings right now and maybe even listening to shows like this one where we say that they're, the best team in the league, and they start to believe that a little too much and maybe start to overlook a team or something like that. I'm not saying that I had a purpose in saying what I'm trying to say on this show, but it can't hurt.
Yeah. No, you gotta do your part. But the thing that has me kind of fired up about this next couple weeks in this stretch of games is, okay, this could be like this last week. It could be the low point in the season in terms of the discussion surrounding the Seahawks team, because imagine the shift that would occur if some crazy things happen. They get the win over the Niners. They come back Monday Night Football, coming off a big win against a division rival. And then they face the Eagles, who, lost to the Niners. So it wouldn't be out of the question then to put together a little bit of a 2-game winning streak against these two teams. And imagine the talk then of, we were writing the Seahawks off a couple weeks ago, and now they've taken down the top 2 teams in the NFC, and they put themselves in prime position on their way to the playoffs. That would be a fun discussion to have, and I have to think about that now, because when else am I going to think about it?
Hey, man, if they do get both of these, which does feel unlikely, then they'd really only need about one more win to probably sneak in over the remaining 3.
Because you're going to have to face the Titans, the Steelers, and the Arizona Cardinals are the final 3 games, right?
Right. And who knows if Pickett's going to be available by the time that we see them towards the end of the year. Cardinals have been up and down. They did just get a big win this last week to hurt their draft stock. So thanks a lot for that. Appreciate that, guys. And, the Titans have been a mess for a good long time. And Will Levis doesn't seem to be the answer. The defense hasn't played as well. They've just had a rough go as a whole this year. But if they did get one of these 2 over the next 2 weeks, 2 or 3 over those last 3 teams that you talked about to have
greedy. I want both. What do you mean 1 of 2?
I'm just saying, if it doesn't happen, even if you can just get 1, it's still a significant shot to make the playoffs if they put it all together. And then also, too, this team at this point, I think you have to have a certain amount of pride. This has to feel like the season at this point, you would think.
Yeah. Well, how many times have we seen a Pete Carroll? I'm sure there's probably a statistic for it. How many times Pete Carroll's lost 4 games in a row? It probably hasn't happened a whole lot.
I can't recall it.
Has it ever?
It's certainly a rarity. No doubt about it if it has ever happened. But he's a bad coach, so he should probably go away.
It's fine. I can handle the Pete Carroll has to go, because I guess I would be in that mindset anyway, thinking back to losing twice to the Rams. Like that definitely, those thoughts cross my mind too.
Those are the ones that are more inexcusable to me than even the loss to the Niners or this one to Dallas. Geez Louise, you just get one of those against a very, very mediocre Rams team, and all of a sudden this whole thing looks totally different. You're still holding on to a wild card spot.
Yeah, that's what sticks with me. So, and there's plays that still stick with me from this game against Dallas. I don't know if we need to get into any of those either.
3rd and 16.
3rd and 16. Geno just floating it a little bit too high for Will Dissly over the middle. Tyler Lockett getting hit in the hands over the middle. That final 4th and 2.
Yeah. It was right
Cross
there.
Whiffing on that other 4th and 2.
Right.
Yeah. Not only Cross, but I think Will whiffed on that too. So they ran to the left and both guys missed their blocks.
Again, the guy did crash down in a way that is not normal. So if it's out of your practice routine, yeah.
Was Micah, he was lined up like almost 2 body lengths away from Cross, and then jumped inside to the B gap.
Yeah.
That's a big distance to cover. And yes. Yeah, I'm sure Cross just was not expecting that.
Not going to see a lot of guys do that in the league. No doubt about it. Micah Parsons is a special talent that way. So yeah, that one, it doesn't hurt my feelings as much as some of the other ones, like the Tyler drop. I mean, it just doesn't happen to him. I mean, he is so money that was difficult.
All right. Well, we've talked about all the difficult things. What do you say we get to the second half of the show?
Beauty.
And as we get into the second half of the show, I find out that Seahawks.com senior reporter John Boyle has some of the answers that we've been asking about in the first half of the show. There's also some other numbers, but he brings up 12 numbers that told the story of Thursday's loss, and there were some other numbers in here, like I said, that answer some question of ours. So going down the list, 5, the number of touchdowns the Seahawks scored, which was their most offensive touchdowns in one game this season. Got to see some red zone scores, and really it was 5 touchdowns. It felt like they scored 7 because, like I said, there were 2 taken off the board.
Yeah.
9 third down conversions on 14 attempts, which is their best performance this season. And they actually started 9 for 11. The number 0 fourth down conversions for the Seahawks on 3 attempts, all of which came in the fourth quarter. This was one other shift that I wanted to talk about because fieldgoals.com, they put out an article this past week talking about how Pete Carroll has kind of shifted his mindset this year when it's come to fourth downs, because historically, very conservative when it comes to fourth downs. Although if you want to go historically, Pete Carroll, the college coach, was very aggressive on fourth downs. And then the NFL coach got a lot more conservative. He has now switched back. I think it was the last 2 years, because it was under Geno Smith. They've been more aggressive on fourth down in these past year and a half than they were previously under Russ.
Yeah. One of the things about the different fourth down attempts here in this game is that for the first time in a long time, I was like, yeah, right decision. You bet. Go for it. And it's refreshing to see. And I think for Pete back in college, the margin of victory in college is so much larger, especially when you're a team like USC with all that talent. So going for it feels a little less risky. Whereas in the NFL, the difference between wins and losses is a lot tighter. And so therefore maybe a little less tolerant to the risk. But
right.
I do enjoy the shift, no doubt.
Continuing on with the numbers, 134, which is the number of yards that DK had. 22.3, Metcalf's top speed in miles per hour on that 73-yard touchdown that made DK the fastest ball carrier in the NFL since week 2 of 2020.
Wow. And that's with the cheetah out there running around in Miami, right? So that's impressive. He's claimed he can beat him in a race. So I'd actually like to see it.
He might be able to. 41 and 33 points and first downs allowed by the Seahawks, the most by an opponent this season in both categories. Not great defense. And then this is the one. This is the answer to the question we had in the first half of the show. The number 3, which is consecutive losses for the Seahawks, who have never lost 4 in a row under Pete Carroll.
Okay. Well, time to keep that streak up. No doubt about it.
They've never lost more than 4 in a row against the Niners. They've never lost 4 in a row of actual games under Pete. So history just has to maintain itself.
Yeah. Yeah. And they can totally do it. And honestly, they probably would have had a pretty good shot at winning that game if the refs hadn't been so uneven throughout the game. Not that was the primary reason they lost, but it certainly was a factor. And I don't know about you, Brandon, but how many guys have you heard on the, football talking head shows saying that, well, yeah, I mean, officials were a little out of control of that game, but every one of those calls was legit. What are they complaining about? That pissed me off bigger than life.
You heard that?
Oh, Florio and Sims were all about it. They're like, well, I mean, I don't know what Pete was grousing about. Those were all fouls, every single one.
Yeah, and then they go on to complain about the fouls that weren't fouls in other games, which looked a lot similar. So I don't know if I put a whole lot of stock into Florio.
Whew. And that lack of DPI in the Packers-Chiefs game at the end there, that was, I don't understand. I honestly have no idea how you look at that and go, yeah, well, no, that's fine. And the other thing I can't figure out is how the NFL hasn't figured out how to get this right, whether it's the guys on the field or from the dudes in New York. You hear a lot of the talk around these subjective calls. You can only really have one guy making those subjective calls. Otherwise, it turns into a crap show. Just look at when they made DPI reviewable a couple years ago. That was a disaster. Well, it was a disaster because the league made it a disaster. They went out of their way to not overturn or upheld certain calls throughout of it so they could be like, oh, look, it doesn't work. Look at that.
It doesn't work. Our officials are perfect at making calls.
How in the world is there not an official in New York watching that play in Packers Chiefs game where was it Valentine just totally like mugs? I mean, that was a half a felony on MVS before the ball gets there. How is it that they can't just like call down and be like, yeah, no, that's actually DPI? I mean, that would take what, 15 seconds? You know, the information travels at the speed of light now, right? Like with fiber optics and catfish.
I thought that was the entire reason that they went to this sort of model, because of the Rams Saints game where that happened. And all you would have to say to the officials is drop a flag there. That was egregious.
Yeah. I don't understand. Like, do they think that they're making the refs look bad?
Pick up the flag because that was ridiculous when Mahomes goes out of bounds and he wasn't yet out of bounds and getting hit by a defender.
Big time.
Like, you, as the official, you say, okay, pick that one up. And then you're not having to go, oh, well, maybe they were doing a makeup call on that call down the field because they shouldn't have called that one on Mahomes. Why not just correct it in the moment with the dude that has oversight over these sorts of things?
It feels like a pride thing because you hear that, well, it's going to make the officials look bad because you're undermining their authority out on the field and da-da-da-da-da. What looks worse? Having Sky Daddy call down and be like, yeah, dude, no, that was DPI, throw the flag. Or a total miss and a change of an outcome that affects not just those two teams, but all the teams that are around them and all the playoff races. To me, it's the getting it wrong that looks the worst, not so much the oversight from an eye in the sky. And it doesn't have to take forever.
No, just get it right. Do it quick. And that was the other thing about some of these reviews, too, is that when you go into review, it's supposed to be, unless you see something egregious, the call on the field stands. Like, unless you see something clear and obvious. Clear and obvious is the wording in the actual rules. And so if it takes you more than, 2 minutes to decide if it's clear and or obvious, then it's not. Move on. Go with the call on the field.
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand how it takes them so long to get to the review process. How many times do we see a play that is going to get reviewed and they're taking forever to have their little conference and, have coffee in the middle of the field or whatever it is that they do. And then by the time that they come out and make the announcement, previous play was under review. You're like, yeah, no catfish, Sherlock. And not only that, but I already have seen it 6 times, and I can tell you right now, it's this or that.
Right.
From an armchair in Montana.
Yeah, and if you're kind of on the fence about it, then, yeah, you go with the call on the field and you live with it.
Or why don't they allow New York to be the ones that watch the review while they're having their little huddle, and then the lead official come over and talk to New York for a couple seconds and be like, oh, yeah, no, we already looked over it. What were you guys thinking? Unless they have a good point, be like, yeah, no, this is what we're doing. And within a minute and a half, you could have this stuff sorted. It's not that hard. It really isn't. And they make it sound like they're launching a catfishing space shuttle. Like, I don't understand.
It continues to be a topic of conversation, just like, we don't know what a catch is anymore. I thought we had it figured out because if you caught it and you got 3 steps, but we even saw in one of the games where, was it the Arizona game where the dude caught it in the back of the end zone and took 3 steps and then went to the ground and fumbled and they called it a no catch, even though they had just called it a catch. It's very weird. And then there was the Niners game against the Eagles where Ayuk, it was a similar thing with Jackson Smith and Jigba, although the hand positioning was slightly different, but the ball touches the ground in both instances, and it's called 2 different ways. And yeah, I still can't understand how that JSN catch wasn't a catch. I mean, it doesn't much matter because they scored anyways, but. And if they wouldn't have called it a catch initially, I could say, okay, well, it looked like it moved. It touched the ground. That's what they saw. But again, it goes back to the clear and obvious thing that you look for in the review.
Yeah, for sure. And then I hear the nonsense of, well, I mean, the officiating's been bad here and there, but you just got to outplay the officials. And then you'll be fine. Yeah, okay. I mean, that's like, I don't know. It's like somebody being like, well, if you just don't run into other cars, you'll never be in an accident. I mean, you can't just do it.
Yeah. If FSU would have just won more games in the college regular season, they could make it to the playoffs.
Yeah. They were out of games, but if they just won more, it'd have been better. Yeah.
Yeah. Never mind. They went undefeated, but yeah, it just win more games.
Yeah. And then the league wonders how there's a pretty solid subsection of fans that believe that this entire league is rigged.
Yeah.
It's getting harder to defend.
It is. I would like to think that our Super Bowl was legit, and would like to think that, our turn, if it's scripted, I want it to be scripted in our favor more often.
Well, yeah. Yeah. Apparently we both need to be script writers instead of doing podcasts. Catfish!
Well, this is what we are doing, and we are doing it because our supporters, our members of the flock who have gone to get in the flock, they're helping to support the show. Want to thank our executive producers, DCH, Rebecca Christensen, Brian Shaw, Jake Burdine, John DeSmartu, and Garen Taylor. And we have a new executive producer coming in this week. Adam has no clue, coming in with a $712.12 donation via PayPal. Go Hawks at SeahawkersPodcast.com for a Hawkra cleansing and to pay for Adam upgrading to Starlink and a month of service. Thanks to Has No Clue.
Hawkra cleansed. That's incredible, man. When you had told me we'd gotten that email from them and that was what they wanted to do, it was crazy. I just can't believe you guys are as generous as you are as a whole. And with that said, I mean, one of the things with that is that I built a new room on the back of the cabin. I'm in it right now. This is a new hobo shack in here, and I figured I needed to do something like the Seahawks here. I need to change everything up. Just take and move everything, try something new, and we're going to do better. And with the Starlink, that will help. And hopefully the Seahawks will take a page out of this book. I cleansed my Hawkra by upgrading everything that I do on my end of things. Now they can do the same. Has No Clue, cleanse their Hawkra. We also got Bob O'Connell coming in and donating $4.50 Canadian coming in. And hopefully Bob will now be a part of our Discord. So welcome to the flock to Bob. Yeah, appreciate it, Bob. Thank you so much. The Discord has been more fun this year, I think, than almost any other year. I think it's because there's been so many more people and the discussion has gotten a lot more diverse. And I actually really dig it. A lot of people get mad when people get a little negative on things. I don't mind it so much. If you want to be negative, be negative. I mean, that's the way I look at it. But it's been fun. And I really look forward to seeing Bob in there as well on game day. I think that'll be awesome. Yeah, and don't take Adam's comments to go over the top with it. Like, be negative to the point of criticism and not just like for the sake of negativity. Right. Yeah. I have something to back it up. Just don't be like, Pete sucks. This field sucks. Our unis suck. The city sucks. I hate the weather. It sucks. I don't even like the shapes of footballs. That sucks. Like, yeah, all that. I mean, that's the type of stuff we're talking about. Can't go that way. Exactly. Guaranteed Barbecue. That place is no good. They don't even serve good food. Garen doesn't know how to cook his way out of a food truck. 12% discount. That sucks. Go on down to Kellogg, Idaho, and mention the Little Flockers discount. Tell them how much his food sucks and go away with a smile. Absolutely. And you're not going to be able to tell them that it sucks. You won't be able to do it unless you are just a really adept liar. Maybe then you can. Right. If you are what are those? Or is it psychopath or is it, what are those people that one of the paths? One of the paths that are really good at lying. Okay. So sociopath, psychopath. Sociopath. Yeah. Sociopath. That's the one I'm thinking of. Not homeopath. So. No, that's probably, you could probably, I don't know. Does barbecue, it feels like a homeopathic type, because I usually feel good after eating a good plate of barbecue. Oh, but I don't feel worse. I can tell you that. So big thanks to our members of the flock. GetInTheFlock.com if you want to help support the show. And we also have our Pick'em League.
We aren't going to go all the way through our picks this week, Adam. I know we have some catching up to do, but we've kind of been off our game this last couple of weeks. I think our members of the flock have been off their game, judging by this latest email from Evie.
Uh-oh.
Dear underlings, apologies for my lack of contact. The Seahawks playing on Thursdays has thrown me out, and I haven't been checking things on the right times. I would like to tell the NFL to only play on a Sunday. In my head, and with a little knowledge, American football should be played on a Sunday. Thank you for my own music. I now encourage Dad to play this every time I walk into a room, as
Yes.
He has so far resisted and looks as grumpy as he did after the Seahawks lost to the Rams, or Lambs as he calls them. So I have taken to playing it myself on my phone when I walk into a room.
I love it. Yeah, walk-in music for Evie. That's perfect.
I have to report that one of you chose the 49ers over the Seahawks last week. With the level of feeling I detect about that team, I feel that not just a pick change is required, but also a punishment. I've told my dad to keep an eye out in the Discord, and he looks for an apology picture. One of you also broke the rules against the Rams. From what Dad tells me, that is also bad, but we should just change their pick and feel sorry for them. Dad is happier. He is now just 4 picks off the lead. He tells me he has been reverse donkeying like Adam has to be reverse Jaguar. We went on a weekend away to London not that long ago and did a tour of Wembley Stadium. There was loads of NFL memorabilia. Dad showed me where he sat when the Seahawks played there. He was very excited. He also saw a full Jaguars kit and other stuff to do with them. I kicked it just for you, Adam. Anyway, back to homework. End of term tests coming up. Keep up the good work and go Hawks. Please. Dad is so grumpy when they lose. From Evie.
Go Hawks, Evie. Yeah, you definitely want Dad in a good mood, but good luck on the end of term tests here and stuff. I have a feeling you're going to crush it.
And to sky's the limit. You must do better. Two weeks in a row. This cannot continue. I do have the authority to change other picks too. So I think if you pick against our Hawks one more time, I will change multiple picks, not just the ones against the Seahawks.
All right. That's a great punishment, and I'm sure that is Evie approved.
She made it sound like there needed to be some sort of punishment more so than just changing the one pick.
Yes, I agree with that.
We're almost getting into the territory. I think there was a third one that had to take place. Did it have to do with wearing an opposing jersey around the office? Something like that.
Yeah, that seems...
We don't want to have to get there.
No, you don't. Don't test her.
On to do better and better at life.
All right, man. My do better this week is for Rich Eisen and his top 5 teams that can make some noise and upset people in the playoffs. Went through his top 5 teams. Guess who was absent?
Oh, I'm sure it was the Seahawks.
Yeah. And then at the end of the segment, they do this thing where it's like, give us one more. He's like, yeah, all right, I'll give you one more. And I was like, oh, well, here we go. He'll definitely put the Seahawks in here, like, for sure. Nope. It was the Cincinnati Bengals with Jake Browning at freaking quarterback and talking about how they have a good chance of making it in the playoffs still. Totally whiffs over the Seahawks there. And I think they have every bit of a chance to make this postseason, as a lot of these teams at the bottom of the NFC and AFC here. And in this do better, I wanted to give you guys a little rooting guide for this upcoming week. There are some teams that you need to be rooting against. Vikings, Packers, obviously the Rams, because them forever. The Bucks and the Saints. So be rooting against them. Those are the teams that we are hoping drop a bunch of games going down the stretch here and make our job a little easier. But for Rich Eisen to not even mention the mighty Hawks after a little bit of a rough stretch here and a favorable schedule the last 3 weeks, do better.
So even say they lose these next 2 games against the top teams, if they get into the playoffs, they would be doing it then on a 3-game winning streak. And, confidence is up.
Mm-hmm.
You're feeling good going up against whoever you end up having to face. I guess it would be the 2 seed or maybe the 3 seed. So either way, you're facing a team that you've probably played once already. I'm looking at it. I'm telling you, and I'm staying optimistic until I can't.
The only way you can eliminate Brandon's optimism is with math.
That is 100% true. My do better this week is for Lee Vowell of 12th Man Rising and the 4 Seattle Seahawks that should not return in 2024, Adam. Ooh. I go through the list and there's some names on there that, you might expect, and shoot, I may have even said myself and would agree with, but I couldn't get past the very first name. Well, is it the first name? No, technically the first name is Drew Lock, which for one, who cares? Like, he's the backup quarterback that doesn't make the team like that much better or worse anyway. But then the second page is wide receiver Tyler Lockett. And what? The reasoning for not bringing back Tyler Lockett in 2024, one is that 4 of his targets has resulted in interceptions, and 3 being where the defensive back wasn't afraid of being more physical against Tyler Lockett. Okay, I don't know if that's true, but fine. Lockett's catch rate in 23 is his lowest since 2017. His average yards per catch is tied for his career low, and his yards per target is a yard lower than any previous season. So he's having a down year. Tyler Lockett's old because he's turning 32 and he's having a down year. So get him on out of here. He's also not on pace now for a 1,000-yard receiving season, which, shocker, because they just drafted a dude in the first round who's getting a lot of work this year. So guess what? DK's numbers are probably down too. And yes, they point out that he had the drop against the Cowboys. So now, because Tyler's old, because his numbers are a little bit down, he's having one down year, and he's scheduled to make a bunch of money over the next couple of years because that's what his contract currently says. It's time to get rid of Tyler Lockett. Leave Al for wanting to cut a leader on this team who, if you think the salary is just correlating to stats, you're completely wrong, and you need to do better.
Yeah, that sounds like an article written by somebody who doesn't watch a lot of football and reads a lot of stats.
Ultimately, when it comes down to cuts in the offseason, it has to do with salary cap and wanting to get rid of dudes so you can have some salary to bring on some other guys. I could understand, like Evan Brown. Okay, he was signed on a 1-year deal, so that was one of the other guys on the list. You drafted Olu-Timmy. If you think he can come in and fill in, and then you kind of have a young line, I can get behind that. Shoot, for sure. I could get behind the fourth one, which is Draymond Jones, which, unless he makes some strides at being defensive end and can show that he can be involved in that position, he's had some of the most pressures on the defense. So it's not like he's had a bad year. It's just that he hasn't maybe had those impactful moments that you would hope for when paying top of the market salary to a guy like that. But again, he hasn't been terrible. He's been maybe slightly disappointing. I feel like the guy who is on here that should be on, who is not, is Jamal Adams. Like, I would put that guy on there over Tyler Lockett.
Yeah, salary to performance. Sure, that makes some sense.
Quandre Diggs, maybe Bobby Wagner, because he's kind of at the tail end of his career.
Yeah, I mean, a lot depends on how long Bobby wants to go and all of that good stuff. I don't think they're going to let him walk out the door again if he's going to go play some more. I just, from this offseason, I don't think that is the story that we're hearing.
How long does Bobby think he wants to play?
A lot of hard telling, not knowing.
Yeah, it seemed weird to me that 32 for one isn't that bad for a receiver, and that he's had,
especially the way he
plays. One down year, even though, and it's still pretty good. Sure, shift some snaps from JSN or from Tyler to JSN next year, and work him more into the offense because he's the future. Maybe in the offseason, Tyler, like if I'm building a list of top 4 guys that I would want to consider maybe a cap change or re-signing and restructure, that would be one of them. But I don't know if I'd get rid of Tyler.
No, and KJ Wright would like to kindly disagree. He has been on record this season saying that there's no doubt in his mind that Tyler Lockett will be a Seahawk for life.
It makes all the sense.
Mm-hmm.
Why would Tyler want to go anywhere else?
I don't think he does. I mean, he has his real estate business and all that here in Seattle.
So it seems like that would, again, make him a prime candidate, that if the performance wasn't quite there, that maybe you do a restructure and you make it work for a guy that's going to be a lifelong Seahawk.
Yeah, I think that's far more likely than showing him the door.
I do not want to see happen what we saw with Bobby Wagner. That can't be done. That can't be replicated. Tyler, lifelong Seahawk. I've made my case.
Yeah, and I think John and Pete probably agree.
On to Better at Life. I'll kick things off with Better at Life because not too many bands make it up to 5 years of touring on the road in front of crowds. But there's one band that's finally looking like they're hanging up their leather wardrobes and makeup kits. The rock band Kiss performed what I currently assume to be their final show after a half decade of touring. And one of the reasons why that's so impressive is they've done more farewell tours than I think most bands have done actual tours. I mean, I remember attending what I thought was one of their first farewell tours back in the 90s, and 20 years later of farewell touring, and now they're completing what may just in fact be their final live show for Kiss. You're better at life than Skip Bayless. Okay.
A band that I do not follow and have not had a lot of thought about, but yeah, I thought they were done years ago. Do they even have the same dudes?
Yeah, I still, because they broke up a little bit and then they reunited in the late 90s. And I think that was going to be one of their first reunion / farewell tour. And then they've been farewell touring ever since.
Interesting. Okay. I had no idea. Not something that I follow in any way.
I wouldn't expect you to know, but you are aware that there is a rock band with the name of Kiss that rocks and rolls all night and parties every day.
That's exactly right. I was aware of their MO. No doubt about it.
Well, they're done.
Okay.
You missed out. If you had any opportunity to see them, you're out of luck. Unless they take off with this Avatar thing that they're trying to do with their to live on forever.
Oh, well, good luck with that. Maybe all the preservatives in that makeup will make it so that they live forever. Maybe that's what will do it for them.
Well, then you wouldn't want to stop.
I guess. Sure. Yeah. I just makeup, tongues, and screaming has never been my definition of entertainment.
It's a good show. You missed out.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I did. You know, the thing is that by me missing out, that just allowed somebody that really does appreciate all that the opportunity to go. So really what I was doing was making it for somebody like you to be able to go and enjoy. Not all heroes wear capes. That's exactly right. All right, man. My Better at Life than Skip Bayless this week is for a channel called the Y-Files. During the post-game pod reaction, I made a reference to Mel's Hole, which is a fascinating story out in the Wenatchee area there. If you are curious, look it up. If you are a fan of the old Coast to Coast AM on AM radio at like midnight with Art Bell back in the day, I don't know if it's still going or who hosts it now, but that sort of thing where they talk about weird stuff, conspiracy-ish things, stuff that's a little taboo. That's what these guys do on the Y-Files. AJ, and he's got a sidekick who's a goldfish called Hecklefish, who's really the conspiracy theorist there. But I wouldn't have known about Mel's Hole until we watched that channel. Brittany loves it. Basically, what's cool about them is they take all these different topics and different conspiracies or weird things or whatever it is, and they talk about it in a really balanced, fair way, I think, for everybody involved, whether you're a skeptic or a true believer or whatever it is. And it's super entertaining. They do an amazing job, and they brighten up our days every Thursday. So AJ and Hecklefish and the Y-Files, Better at Life than Skip Bayless. I was introduced to Art Bell when my dad was truck driving, and that was, it was the late night show that you listened to because it helped keep you awake. It was interesting, and it was fun. George Norrie is the one that took over for it, and I think he might even still be doing it. That feels right. Just now that I'm not on the road as much, I don't road trip like I used to. So sure, I don't catch it like I used to. But Fun stuff, fun conversations. Gives you a little break from football if you're looking for it. And, it's better than anything that's on the networks. That's for darn sure.
Back before podcasts, kids, there was a thing called AM radio. And the good thing about AM radio is that you could get those stations longer on long road trips before you had to search for it somewhere else on the radio dial. Whereas, podcasts, you turn them on. It doesn't matter if you have reception or not. That's how we used to do things back in the old days.
That's right. I can remember being a young man and driving around in my old Cherokee up in the hills and catching AM broadcasts from way up in Calgary, up in Canada. Like it does. It travels a good distance.
All right. Well, we've fantasized about what could happen over the next couple weeks. We've looked back into our history and think back to the good old times of AM radio. And we have just completed one more episode, 425 in, Adam.
We did it look, man, I'm calling for it. I think the Seahawks get the dub in Santa Clara. I'm just feeling it. I feel it in my gut. I feel like this team's ready to explode and put together a complete game finally on both sides of the ball. It's within range. They can do it. It's time. I really want it. And so for my Hawker and yours, Seahawks win on Sunday. That's what I'm saying.
It needs to happen on Sunday, the following week against Philadelphia, and all the way out through the end of the season. Our Seahawks need to make it happen. And I think with that,
there's only one thing left to say.
Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.